super fun 19 years of my career, and it allowed me to really learn and absorb brand new stuff all the time, but with the same company. So I was really fortunate that I landed that first job in a company that was growing at a speed of light, and I could grow with it.
Talk us through in your own words in terms of becoming an adult, recognizing that's what you were moving towards, moving away from where you came from in that sense. But how did that manifest in terms of that early leadership style? We mature, we're an adult, we've got the whole world against us, but we still got a lot to learn. So what do you remember about that?
It's okay to make mistakes, right? You almost have to make mistakes to learn what you like and what you don't like. And my advice to anyone that wants to listen to me when I eventually get time to go into schools and talk to them is there is no desired pathway. There's just a pathway, right?
Hello and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Jo Cox has joined me in the studio today. Jo, welcome.
Hi, good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. We always start by getting to know our guest a little bit more. So please tell the audience a bit about yourself.
So my name's Jo Cox. Thank you for the introduction. I'm currently the CEO of 3 small gas companies across Guernsey and the Isle of Man called the Island Energy Group. Very much the last few years of my career, utilities, but prior to that, telco. So Vodafone really grew me up for 19 years of my career and really made me, I would strongly say, who I am today, because they allowed me to try on lots of different hats and see where I belong. Outside of that, I've got 2 children, Harrison and Darcy, aged 15 and 13. They're fantastic. They're the light of my life, and a fabulous supportive husband who is the sort of force behind me, actually. And I often think, a lot of people say, gosh, what's your husband like? Because I am quite directional and forthright. And actually, he is the perfect blend with me in that he's very relaxed and calm and consistent. And for me, where I've got to today is very much because we're Team Cox, we call it.
Brilliant. And that's what we're going to be talking a lot about today, about relationships, because it's so important, both relationship with ourselves, relationship with others as we go through our lives, and how we perceive those differently and how we learn and mature. So I'm really glad you've got a really strong foundation with Team Cox, which is brilliant. So let's go into the first question, which I'm really excited about. So it's really trying to reconnect with that childhood, with that early experience that shapes us, those early systems, and everyone's unique around this. So tell us a little bit about how you grew up and what was going on for you that helped to shape that early leadership style.
Yeah, so there's multiple things I think that made me who I am today from my family background. I'm a twin, so that's actually really important, because I have had a wingman my whole life. You know, from the age of 0, I have had a really great wingman, and it's a twin brother, actually. We are similar and hilariously different all at the same time, in that I say we're similar in that our values are incredibly the same. But my parents split up when we were 3, and John, my twin brother, stayed with me until we were 11, and then he went to live with my father. And I think that is quite an interesting first point in our childhood, where someone you've had your whole life that has been your wingman then leaves and has a very, very different upbringing, in that my mother married multiple men, unfortunately, after my father when I was 3. And so change has always been a consistent thing in my childhood, because that meant we moved a lot. I had lots of different stepfathers, and my mum worked all the time because she was, in effect, through periods of that time, a single parent. So I became fiercely independent very, very young. And I also became very, very used to change very, very young. And I would probably say that my twin brother chose to leave because of that, because of the inconsistency and the lack of stability and the independent side. And that's, again, where we become quite different in our styles. I think he's, really good at change, etc., just like I am. But I think I thrive on it, and I think that's because I had to. It's a bit that sink or swim, from when you're very, very young. So change has always been consistent. Moved around a lot. Had to make friends a lot. Lots of different schools, and that independence of get yourself to school, get yourself home, cook your own dinner. So it's from a very, very young age had to learn independence and change. We actually, interestingly, are still incredibly close, my twin brother and I, and we see each other all the time, and we speak to each other every single week. So that relationship has always been an incredibly brilliant foundation to who I am today. And I think that, again, we talked at the beginning about Team Cox. Actually, that team, the family and your support network around you, I do think drives into who you become and how you face challenges through your adult life. Because if you have that fantastic concrete foundation, and I had that both with my twin brother all the way through my childhood and now my husband, I think that's really important to how you take the hits through your adult life and through your career, because nothing's breezy, is it?
Absolutely. So that's fascinating. And we're going to come back to this reference point, I think, of you and your brother, and because him growing up in a different environment in that sense, and maybe reference that as we go through. But the question that's on my mind now, bearing in mind what you were going through during those early years, is, can you remember what was the earliest age you had some semblance of a dream or what it is you wanted to do with your life?
So I do remember, because my mother went from relationship to relationship and we moved a lot, we didn't really have a lot. And actually, my father was incredibly successful. So he was a big leader in an electric company, and then created his own, it was called the voltage control relay system, created his own business. So he's very entrepreneurial, very leadership, very, a directional force. So I'm quite similar to him in personality. And actually, therefore, my brother had a very different upbringing. His was, big house, private schooling, really different environment where it was luxurious. And I had the other side, the absolute other side, where we lived in a tiny little house, moved a lot. My mum worked really, really hard, but we didn't have anything. And I know that was always challenging for my brother and my father, because they wanted me to go and live with them, because obviously they could see that I was in, not the greatest of positions. But actually, that's one of my values, is I'm incredibly loyal. I'm like a steadfast, no, what if I go, then what does she have? So I think that's really interesting, because what I decided when I was very young is I would never be like that. I would never be constantly doing hand to mouth living. So I had a really odd lens, in that I had a father who worked ridiculously hard. Everything he got was because of him. He worked crazy hours, wasn't at home a lot because he worked really, really hard, built a business from zero to incredibly successful, could see that lens, but then could also see my mother working hard, not in a very different sense of work, but having a very different lifestyle. And I thought, well, I choose the other lifestyle, right? I choose the better lifestyle. I choose to work hard. That's always been the consistency from both parents. But actually, one isn't as effective as the other. That's clear to me. Going and working for somebody and grafting 9 to 5, day in, day out, for very little succession planning or reward, that's not the right path for me. So from a very young age, I recognised hard work, graft, but being different and striving to move up the ladder would get me the lifestyle that I could see my brother having, living with my dad. So it was a really interesting way of growing up, because you got both sides of the coin.
I love that. So talk us through, in your own words, in terms of becoming an adult, recognizing that's what you were moving towards, moving away from where you came from in that sense. But how did that manifest in terms of that early leadership style? We mature, we're an adult, we've got the whole world against us, but we still got a lot to learn. So what do you remember about that?
So I was very, we say lucky. I was very fortunate in that I got a job that I really liked when I was really young. I decided, my brother went the traditional route and went to university, and I decided I wanted to earn some money. So I decided, well, I'm going to take a year out. I've done my A-levels. I did okay. I'd like to earn some money before I then go off and choose to potentially go to university. At the time, I wanted to go to a drama school. So I went to work for what is now Vodafone, but was Rakel Vodak. So it was this tiny little company that wasn't the huge global company that it is today. And I really liked working. What I really clocked about myself very early days is I just like working because I like learning, but in that traditional style of show me, I'll do it well, I'll move on to the next job. So I recognize my learning style is hands-on. Roll your sleeves up, do it, practically do it, not go and sit in a classroom and someone teach me, academically. That's so the very traditional style of learning. So within my first year out at Rakel Vodak, I flew. I absorbed everything everyone taught me. I loved it. I loved learning. I liked working really, really hard. I loved the pay packet. I loved the independence that gave me. So I made the decision. I'm just going to stay doing this because I really like it. And the people around me recognized that I liked learning and I liked working hard. And if they gave me something new and a challenge, I grasped it with both hands. And so that's why I then had 19 years of a career at Vodafone, because they put me in wherever there was a new challenge or a change required. They could see that I just would love it. I would like, oh, there's a challenge, give it to Jo, see if she can make it work. And in my first year of working at Vodafone, my job was really boring. It was to persuade someone not to cancel their mobile phone contract. And it wasn't a mobile phone contract like today. It was, £1,000 a month. It was ridiculous money. And it was those huge briefcase phones that look huge now. And my job was to persuade people not to cancel. And I had a 0 churn rate, which meant no one cancels once they've spoken to me. And my manager said, how come no one cancels when they speak to you? I said, it's really easy. There's generally these 5 reasons why people ring to say they can't afford it. The coverage is rubbish. Here's the answer to each of those questions. So I wrote a script and I gave it to everybody in the call center and said, just if they say this, turn to page 2, here's your script. And so quickly in Vodafone, they realized I'm quite creative and innovative with a problem solving. And that's who I am still today, is give me a problem and I love chewing it over to see if I can solve it. But it's a very non-traditional route, like the problem solving, like university, etc. Yeah. So I had 19 years of, I probably did 40 different jobs in Vodafone, where they'd put me in marketing or they'd put me in global. I was the number 4 in the global account team, where I was getting on a plane in my 20s and flying to Spain because they were considering buying Vodafone Spain, So it was super fun, 19 years of my career, and it allowed me to really learn and absorb brand new stuff all the time, but with the same company. So I was really fortunate that I landed that first job in a company that was growing at a speed of light, and I could grow with it. So I was really fortunate with where I landed for my first job.
Fantastic. And I'm really curious now, in terms of, you say not many people get that opportunity, and it was growing, so you still had opportunities to grow with it in that sense. Can you remember the first time that a manager or a leader or somebody in the business who really saw even more potential in you from a leadership perspective took you to one side and said, Jo, you're great at solving problems, you can manage the people that are solving the problems, but actually what we need you to do now is actually start doing a bit more of this to round you out? Can you remember when that was?
Well, it was really interesting because one of the big moves that I'd made, once I'd gone from this little hot desk of persuade people not to cancel, that's when Rakel Vodak moved into Vodafone, but they split into Vodafone Corporate and Vodafone Connect. And they asked me to set up a massive call center to handle all the consumer calls coming in and train all the agents on how to answer the phone. And we became a one-stop shop. So you could connect someone or disconnect someone, or you did everything as an agent. And my job was to train all the agents, which was brilliant. I loved it. Didn't ever see myself running a call center, happened into that. But one of the other guys, in a big CEO in one of the mobile side of things, really thought I could be a salesperson. So he called me and said, would you move over and try selling, because I think you're really natural at selling. So I said, sure, yeah, that's great. So I moved over to there and I had an opportunity to sell, and it was fantastic and I loved it. And it was definitely where I started to think, okay, this is where I think I shouldn't be running call centers. I think I should be on the sales side of things. Loved it. Then I got noticed, and somebody else from Vodafone Paging, so not in the mobile side, tried to steal me. And my boss at the time blocked my move because it was one big and I went to see him furious and said, how dare you stop me being promoted? This is outrageous. I can't believe that you've done this. He said, here's your first lesson in life, Jo Cox. Never make yourself indispensable. And I stared at him and I thought, what? I said, but if I'm that good, surely you let me go. And he said, no, you're that good that if I let you go, then all my sales start. And it was one of my first big lessons in life is always have a succession plan. Because if you're the only person that can do that job, you are going to create, in effect, barriers in a company for progression because they can't let you go because who else is going to do that job behind you? So I was fuming, as you can imagine. And when I came back, he said to me, this is my first big tip to all of your listeners, I will coach you because you are not the rounded article. You think you are because you've been doing really well, and you've been spotted and you've been given great opportunities. But here's the flip side of that. First of all, the biggest mistake you made was making yourself indispensable. It's why I've blocked your move. And P.S. I can. So he did. But as compensation, what I'm going to do is coach you on how to round off your edges because you are too vocal. You are too punchy sometimes with, you round off your edges. So instead of just saying, here is what I want, he said there's the sandwich of, this is what I would like. Here's the stuff in the middle. This is what I can do for you. It's not all one-way traffic. So I will coach you. I think you can develop and be brilliant. And actually, he was true to his word. He actually sat me down and said, here are your blind spots. Here's where I think you need to work on. You're very commercial. You're very salesy, but sometimes you need to stop and you need to start listening more. And I thought, you're right. Because he said, I say something to you and you've already run off like a train and decided what the answer is. But you need to stop, pause, and learn the art of listening, reflecting before you speak. And he was right. I was young, I was excited, I was ambitious, I had 5 million ideas. And he taught me patience, bring in the quieter ones in the room. You're naturally the noisy one. You always want to, answer the question, give other people space, wait, let the quieter ones answer. That for me has been really, really important through leadership, because if you're the noisiest one in the room, everybody else will quieten down, especially if you're the C-level, because they think, can I challenge? So the quietness and the pausing allows the quieter ones to have their voice. So it's that first point in my career of I can't have it all my own way. And B, that was a slap round the chops around never make yourself indispensable. And then the third point was coaching is paramount to becoming a great leader because you never have all the answers.
Love that. And what I also like about that in terms of, for the listeners, is this moving from doing, which you were doing and being very successful, and obviously managing leaders, but doing and come up with the ideas. And then this point about actually it's not just about me, and this is where I was many years ago, it's about us and we, and suddenly we come into relationship. And of course, to be effective in relationship, we really have to be with people to actually understand what it is. So that transition, whenever it happens, and it happened for you, of doing to being and moving from I to we is very difficult for many people because we've been doing it for so long. So can you recall again what challenges you faced during that transition? Even though you're being coached and you knew you had the awareness, doing it is another thing. What were the major challenges you think as you went through that transition?
Yeah, I think there were lots of different transitions, because one of the things, when you're noisy and you're confident in your role, you can come across as having a very big ego. Now, actually, I did never have a big ego. I did have an ego. You do when you're told you're fantastic in your early days of your career and you're very successful in it. There's a double-edged sword though. So the first point is some people do think, oh, she's got a really massive ego, and would say that. So you think, okay, I need to check myself, because that's absolutely not how I want to come across. So that reflects back into the reflecting, be quiet. And there was a moment that happened to me again with a mentor of mine. I'll tell you a really funny story. So someone really high up, very, very high up in Vodafone. I'd been doing a big sales pitch to Ernst & Young for a really big contract, and I'd taken one of the C-levels from Vodafone in for peer-to-peer mapping. He was sat next to me. And while I was talking to Ernst & Young and doing this pitch, he leant over and he wrote down a word in front of me, and it said, I. And he put little speech marks around it. And I thought, oh, he's basically given me a nudge that I'm saying I too much. I will do this. I will do that. I. And it made me pause, and I thought, oh God, oh crap. So then I thought, okay, change your language. But that moment, there are moments in your career that you'll never forget, ever. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm doing it. And I hadn't even recognized that. And it was because I was trying to prove myself and saying, I will do this for you and I will do that for you. But it's much more collaborative if you say we as a team, and we will do that. And I really do always am conscious of when I use the word I a lot in when I'm doing pitches and town halls or anything. I'm very conscious to try and use the word we, because it does sound a lot more collaborative. And then on the way home from that meeting, I was in the car with him and he was doing busy. And, I was mildly terrified of him. And I said, can I ask you a question? He said, yeah. And I said, would you mentor me? And he stared at me and he went, no, I haven't got time. And I thought, oh, okay. And then the annoying voice of Jo that happens quite often said, you're going to take no for an answer, are you? And I stared at him and I said, and as it was coming out of my mouth, I thought, I might get fired. That's quite a disappointing response, because I only want half an hour of your time, say every 3 months. And as a woman in this business trying to strive to be better, I would have appreciated it if you could have just given me a little bit of time to make me better. And he put his pen down and he stared at me, and I thought, is he going to fire me? And he went, you're absolutely right. I will mentor you. And that was a really big step change. If he hadn't have written I'm not sure I'd have thought, you're my check and my balance. Will you mentor me? But then there's a part of you, and I would say this to any of your listeners, if you're going to be a leader, you have to be courageous. And there was a moment that I could have said, he said no, the end. But sometimes you've just got to really pull your big pants up and go, right, I'm going to challenge that. That's not okay. Why did you say no? I'm not asking you for a huge amount. And that was a pivotal point in my career as well, because he did mentor me and he was fundamental to how I then progressed through my career going forward. Because what he said to me, and this was a really big learning, is he said, you're noisy and you're sunshine and you generally come in the room and people will do one of two things. She's bubbly, she's nice, the end. And there's a question around whether they take you seriously. Because you're noisy and you're bubbly and you're keen to please, you have to demonstrate your credibility very, very quickly when you're meeting someone for the first time. And I'm going to teach you how to do that. And it was around what you say has to be important, not just drivel and chat, And he used to coach me on, when you meet someone for the first time, ask questions. So that's really important. Ask questions about them, because people like to know that you're listening, and you demonstrate you're listening because you ask questions. And then you continue to ask questions so they feel involved and collaborated with. But also listen to the answer, Jo. And I was like, okay, got it. And he said, and then deliver a nugget of information that demonstrates that you're as bright as you are. And I was like, okay. And he said, because people then immediately take you seriously, but you have to do that within the first 2-3 minutes, because otherwise they've already decided who you are. And I still think of that when I'm meeting people for the first time is, don't get ahead of yourself. Don't be over, zealous in your chat, or let them have some space. Listen to what they're telling you, ask them some questions. And I do still have to have that voice in my head today, because I am naturally, as you can guess, a talker, and I like to talk and I like to engage and I'm excitable, but I have to remind myself of that in every single meeting that I have, which is calm down, you're quite overzealous, let them have their space. So that's a little narrative I constantly have. The other thing that I think that happens as you progress through your career is imposter syndrome. And it still happens today when I get my next big job. You can do it, but you always have a think about, can I do it? Can I do it? Are they about to find me out? And I think most leaders actually do have that imposter syndrome. And that's why coaching and mentoring continuously is important. I think what happens is, as you get on and on and on through your career, sometimes you you forget to do the coaching and mentoring and the mindfulness and the checking and the balancing, but you should never be done, because your next job should always push you slightly out of your comfort zone. Otherwise, why are you doing it? And that's one of the other things that a coach said to me, and from Ernst & Young, actually. I met them in that same era. He said to me, when you're in your comfort zone, you have to do things that make you uncomfortable, because that's how your comfort zone gets bigger. And he drew these 3 circles: comfort zone, discomfort, panic. And he said, and when you're taking that next position, you have to decide whereabouts it puts you on the grid of discomfort and panic. And I still check and balance that and go, okay, is this job going to put me into discomfort, or is it going to put me into panic? Am I bitten off more than I can chew? So that's how I always check and balance that imposter syndrome. Is it just nerves, or have I bitten off more than I can chew? And then really the final caution that I've sort of had from more profiling, actually. So I like insights profiling. I know there's lots of different profiling. I find insights sort of quite generic and good, easy to understand. Is the feedback I've had from most people that work with me is that I'm so used to working really hard and going at a very fast pace, that most people want to please me and try to keep up with me, and that therefore they get burnout, because I do go at a very fast pace and I'm very conscious of that. So I have to watch the people that work with me all the time and make sure that I'm doing their check and balance to say, why are you working at this hour? I'm not expecting you to do that. I'm very conscious that people do try and follow me and keep up with me at that pace. So that's a watch out that I've been told that I need to just keep one eye on all the time, is make sure that people don't try to match my pace. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It's great. And that brings us nicely to what a lot of people listening to this and watching this will be thinking about next, particularly if they've been in an organization and shown loyalty, as you did, for a long time. What was the inflection point? You left Vodafone. What happened up to that? How much was it you actually deciding you were going to go, and how much was actually maybe I'm sort of being not forced, but this is moving, I'm ready to go and do something, it's moving in that direction?
19 years in one company is a long time, right? And one of my mentors said to me, after 19 years, you're either there for life or now you've got to move, Jo, right? Because I'd in effect hit that glass ceiling of, you either move into a C-suite position, very senior position, or you jump ship. And actually at that time, another opportunity came to me that, again, this is where the wingman sort of concrete foundational support network comes into play, right? Because it was moving us across Guernsey, and it was cable and wireless, which incidentally then Vodafone bought cable and wireless, but not the island. So I had an opportunity. Would I consider moving to Guernsey and running Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man from a commercial point of view? It was moving into a C-level position out of Vodafone, so it was a great opportunity. But it impacted my family. I had 2 very small children, a 2-year-old and a newborn, 6 months old. Did we want to up ship and move the entire unit across to Guernsey? So it was a real family decision. And my husband sat me down and said, it's now or never. You're either now at Vodafone forever, because after 19 years, really, if you don't take this, you're never going to move, or we go. And I think we should go. So sometimes you need the support network to give you that little shove. And it was a great catalyst to me moving into a C-level position, safe, small, and really sort of starting a new career path, still in telco. So it's a bit like what they say, don't move house, have a baby, get married, you do all the big things all at the same time. Move house, but don't change your vertical. So staying in telco was great because that was safe and I knew telco really well, but it allowed me to move into a C-level position, and it gave me confidence that I didn't have to stay in the same area. It was only Guernsey, it was across the water, but it was still upping and moving the family. So it gave me confidence to really think about any position. Didn't matter where we were going to move to after that cable and wireless. I could move anywhere because we've done it once. So it was a really good catalyst to moving, but it was the coaching and my support network around me that allowed me the confidence to make that leap, if I'm honest.
And during this next stage of your career, and obviously you're shifting now, so you haven't got the support network in place in the corporate side of it. I'm just curious, we said we'd come back to this. Can you recall at that point, as you're making that move and starting to settle in, what was it you were learning from your brother and the way that he had lived his life to that point? Bear in mind you've been so close as twins, that you could bring into your life then to help you.
Yeah, so incidentally, John, my brother John, he's ended up in exactly the same position as me. So that's a test case in itself, isn't it? Two twins, very different career paths, pretty much do exactly the same job. He's in utilities as well as a CEO. So really interesting. I think the fact that at any point I could have spoken to my brother and come back, or had that support network, it gives you that confidence to say, do you think this is the right decision? And they're like, well, if it's not, it doesn't matter. So what? And it's the other thing that I got taught at the same time. What's the worst that could happen? Okay, well, nothing bad could really happen, right? You take the job, you go there, you don't like it, and come home. Yeah. So I think having a brother that's taken a very different career path but come out at the same place means there isn't one route. There isn't one route to success. You can go left at a T-junction, right at a T-junction, straight forward. You can still end up in the same place. And it's okay to make mistakes, right? You almost have to make mistakes to learn what you like and what you don't like, and where you should be, because you've got to work out what you don't like to find out what you do like. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can try things on and go, no, I don't like that. I bring that through into quite a lot of the coaching and development that I do. So all of my leaders generally get a development session with me. And one of the things that I ask them is, write down a list of all the things you love doing. What brings you joy? And it could be from a personal point of view. It can be from a work point of view. They give me the full list. And sometimes the reason the personal point of view is important in that equation is because, say they're doing something that takes them away from their family, but the thing they love most is their family, then what are they doing? Say the thing they love most is sailing, and that means that they have to finish work at 5 o'clock every day, but their job means that they don't ever get to sail. What are they doing? So it's really important that in that process where I'm asking them to write down everything they love doing, they bring in the personal aspect. But sometimes people say, I absolutely hate spreadsheets and I hate project management, and they do that job. And I think, but isn't that 90% of what you do, and it doesn't bring you joy? So why are you doing it? And then I ask them the flip side, which is, what are all the things that you don't like doing? So then they list that out, and then we look at their job description and say, all right, okay, you're sort of in the right seat, because 80% of what you're doing is in the joy bucket and 20% is in the don't really like doing it. But it's that balance for me, is, have you got the balance right of what brings you joy and what doesn't bring you joy? And if you're firmly sitting in the 50% joy, 50% not joy, I think you need to relook at what you're doing day in, day out. Absolutely. So John, my brother and I talk about that all the time. We share podcasts with each other all the time and say, this resonates with me. So we will ping backwards and forwards all the time and learn from each other all the time, but in very different pathways.
Yeah, I love that. I've got a couple more questions to ask you, Jo. I've loved our chat together so far. Obviously, you went to Guernsey, and I know you've been on the islands, and I also know you've been through very difficult, challenging circumstances from a company perspective as well, in terms of what's happened on the island. So when those things happen for you, whether it's something around a corporate or something personal, what is it that actually enables you to look after your own well-being with all of that responsibility and weight that comes with that?
I think you've already nailed it with the word well-being, right? Because I think sometimes when you're a leader, there's a language that I use, which is, where's your tank? How full is your tank? And I get a lot from podcasts. It's why I wanted to do this, because actually you do listen to podcasts and take, even if it's just a couple of nuggets. Brené Brown uses a thing with her husband where she'll talk about the tank. So when she walks into the door at the end of the day, he'll say, where's your tank? And she'll say 20%. And he'll say, I'm at 80. So we're good. I'll do dinner tonight, because you're low. What fills your tank? And for me, that's incredibly important for you as an individual and a leader to understand, is where do you get your tank filled from? And the reason that's important is because I get my tank filled from people. I really like people, as long as they're not negative. I generally get a lot of joy and energy and fuel from people, and I like being around people. My husband gets his tank emptied from people. So it's not a negative thing, it just means that it takes from him. So to fill his tank up, he needs quiet space. So understanding where your tank is and what you need to top it up is really, really important. But at the same time, sometimes I know I'm just exhausted and I need to be quiet and read a book. And friends network around me is, I say to them, my tank's a bit empty. I'm going to take 10. I'm not coming tonight. And that common language that I use with my friends, my husband, my brother is, my tank's empty. This is what I need to fill it. Knowing your tank and what you need to fill your tank is really vital when you're going through stuff, because we are all victims of saying yes to things that we don't necessarily want to do. And that's okay if your tank is full. But if your tank is low and you're going to a massive party that's going to drain it even further, then you've consciously got to make a decision to put yourself first, because otherwise, to be a high performer, you have to know your levels and you have to have that tank full to be able to draw from it. The other language that I use with all of the people that work for me is my goodwill tank, which is, in order to take from someone's goodwill tank, you have to fill it to begin with. So really small things like, hi, I want to go and see my children's sports day. Of course, the answer is yes, because that's a goodwill tank filler. It doesn't have to be monetary. In fact, most of the time it isn't monetary, right? It is the small recognition, sending someone flowers, the thank yous, the recognition process fills people's tanks. So in answer to your question, I am very conscious of where my tank is most of the time. I'm very aware of what I need to get some headspace or fill it. There was a period of time at work when it was absolutely bonkers, and I wasn't paying attention, so I wasn't filling it enough and got to near breaking point. My fitness had gone. I wasn't doing any fitness. I hate running, but I love it from a mindfulness point of view. I'm really crap at it. So I then said, okay, in my mind, I had to go for an hour run. No, 10 minutes. It's fine. Let's start with 10 and build it up from there. And as soon as I started putting time aside to go for a run with a good podcast on, I could feel my own tank and my own resilience coming back. But I think we've probably all done it as individuals, is you put yourself last and it gets to breaking point for you to go, oh, whoops, don't let it get to that point. And one of the big learnings from this job that I'm doing today is I let it get to 0 and I won't do that again.
No, I love that. And that resilience tank is a really nice visual image as well. And I think most of us sometimes view resilience as that ability, that stiff upper lip and get back up again. But actually it's drawing on, the resources that we already have. We're already enough. It's just making sure, as you say, it's topped up. So thank you for that. One final question for you. I'll let you go, Jo. And something I've been thinking about what you said right at the start in terms of, you being a twin and growing up in that kind of environment. Let's assume, this may be possible soon, there is a time machine that enables you to go back to your 10-year-old, 11-year-old self. And you're coming at it from a perspective of that loving individual that wants this child to actually feel everything is going to be all right, which obviously is in those years ahead. What words of advice, or how would you be with that 10 or 11-year-old if you were able to go back and visit them?
I love that you've asked me that question, because one of the things that I want to do is going to schools and talk to children about their pathway to the careers that they're going to have. And I think it's when you're a kid and you have no idea what you want to do and you think you have to know what you want to do. My advice to anyone that wants to listen to me when I eventually get time to go into schools and talk to them is, there is no desired pathway. There's just a pathway, right? So it is all part of the journey, right? You don't have to have the answers first. We don't have to come out of school and go, I want to be. Now, granted, if you want to be a vet, or if you want to be a doctor, or if you want to be something that technically needs a certain amount of degrees, etc., of course, you probably have to have an inclination. But if out the 90% doesn't have a clue what they want to do, nor did I. right? I did customer services. I sold pages to the NHS. I sold mobile phone contracts to tiny little businesses, all the way up to the Ernst and Youngs and the Oracles of the world. I then moved to Guernsey and did some random job over there. And you have to just sort of try it on and see how it fits. And as long as you've got that support ring around you, it's okay to get it wrong. First of all, it's okay to get it wrong. And it's all right to work out, I don't like this job, I do like this job. The reflection part, listening, learning, reading, podcasts, absorb as much as you can, because in your early years, it's about learning, not having all the answers and getting paid, right? So just go to people that you think are inspiring, see if you can work for them, even if it's, apprenticeships, or go to people that are inspiring for you, because that's where you get your learnings. And coaching and mentoring, for me, if someone's prepared to give you their time, grab it with both hands, because who I am today has been because of all the people that have been prepared to give me their time. And if they inspire you and you like them and you think you can learn from them, ask them. Say, people are really flattered when you ask them to be, when you're asked to be a coach. They're like, oh, you want to learn from me? That's really flattering. So learn as much, try a lot of stuff on when you're young and you don't have a mortgage over your head and all these big family commitments. Try, learn, absorb, test it out, because I think we get pushed to have all the answers from a really young age. And actually, there isn't, if you choose this pathway, you can then pivot and go to a different pathway. There isn't one pathway. You can try lots of different routes, like a little maze, and eventually you'll work out what you like. But you learn from people, and you learn from reading, and you learn from coaching and mentoring and creating that friendship network around you, in my opinion.
And what I love about what you said there is it's also reflected in your brother's journey as well, because a very different path, and yet you've ended up obviously in similar roles.
Exactly the same
So,
seat. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Jo, I've really appreciated you joining me today. I know you're very busy. Thank you very much. And I know that all the audience that have listened to and watched this would have definitely taken those nuggets away, and let's hope they apply them some way in their own future to their own lives. So thanks again for being on the show.
Good. Nice to talk to you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.